Welcome to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor. Really pleased to have with me Bret Oliver. He's a chip off the old block. That is Michael Oliver, one of our most popular, if not our most popular guests on this show. And it's really good to have Bret here. He's learning the trade from his father, and he's focusing more on individual companies. So there's several of those we want to ask him about. Bret, thanks for joining me today.
Jay, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it's good to have you. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, it's a delightful thing to have a son following his father's footsteps. And your dad has pretty big footsteps. So, but I'm sure you'll be equal to the
Very
task
true.
over time. Yeah. All right. So you're going to talk to me about a couple of miners that you saw that seem to show some promise, I guess, from a technical point of view. I certainly know Core Mining very well, trades on
Hmm.
New York Stock Exchange, CDE. It's one of
Right.
my favorites. It's one that's done extremely well. And I was just looking at just reported quarterly earnings of 41 cents a share. Cash flow from operations, $239 million during the quarter, Q3. So
Hmm.
41 cents per share in Q3 and 239 million in cash flow from operations. So obviously looking very, very good fundamentally. How do they look technically to you?
Hmm. Well, so technically, Core is one that we've been looking at now for a while. It's been outperforming a lot of other miners out there, outperforming the index, so to speak, if you compare it to, GDX.
Hmm.
And I would say our main focus has been on silver miners as far as,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
what part of the complex is going to do better. The interesting thing with Core is, I know that it's kind of a hated stock or has been, but it broke out of a 20-year downtrend on price. And
Uh,
when you look at the annual momentum situation, it broke out of a decade or actually older downtrend there. So it's just broken out this year. And this is just the initial surge. And it
uh-huh.
hit my first target, which was I was expecting to see $16 to $18 a share. So it definitely got there and a little bit more. And my next target beyond that, this is just based on annual momentum
Hmm.
and where it could go. I could easily see it. I'm not saying tomorrow, right? But this could be a year or two from now. I could easily see it reach into the 50s,
Hmm.
possibly even to 80. But just to keep it conservative,
Hmm.
I could easily see it get to the 50s. So that's a huge move from here. Well, I guess the recent high was just shy of 25. We've pulled
Hmm.
back now to the 16s.
Hmm.
So from the recent high, at least, that's a double or a bit more that I'm talking about, but
Hmm.
could even maybe go higher than that. But so that's the technical setup. We love it for that reason.
Yeah.
And and of course we know that from a fundamental perspective, at least from what I have heard, they've sort of improved their situation and have been
Yes.
paying down debt. Their cash
Oh
flow
yeah.
is
Yeah.
rising. So yeah.
Yeah. In no small part, that has resulted, I believe, because of the acquisition of Silvercrest, their
Hmm.
best asset. And it's a company that I had followed when it was a penny stock all the way through into my newsletter and have continued to cover Core in my newsletter because I could see that Crestcat was going to, or Silvercrest was really going to give
Mm-hmm.
them a boost, and they certainly are by far their best
Indeed.
mine. Yeah, okay, well, thank you. So there's still, you would still see, I mean, do we have to see higher silver prices for that to happen? Or are you assuming that silver prices probably, I mean, maybe you could comment on what you see
Hmm.
at silver. I know your father is as bullish on silver as can be. Uh,
Indeed.
and almost everything that he proclaims that he owns has something to do with silver. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. No, I mean, so we do expect silver prices to continue to rise. And even I would say in the next 3 to 6 month time frame, we expect another big upside move in silver. And my dad believes it's going to go to 100
Hmm.
uh, in the next, say, quarter or two.
Wow.
Uh, and I would maybe be a bit more conservative. That's, if you want to say it's a point of contention between us, it's okay, well, maybe the 70s or 80s, but we'll
Yeah.
just see. We'll see what it does. But I think there is another big explosive move here in the next 3 to 6 months. And that what's going on now is more of a head fake correction. It's not the substantial type of correction that I think the bears are kind of hoping it is. I think that's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
So no, we do expect the silver price to continue to rise, and therefore the miners are going to continue to benefit from that.
Hmm.
Uh, and in the much bigger picture, for the next several years to come, we don't think that this bull market's over. It's a secular bull. So you kind of have to take a bit of a wider view in the mining stocks. It's not necessarily going to be a straight line up, like in the case of core from 16 here to 50.
Yeah.
There'll be zigzags, but that's sort of the ultimate target that I'm looking at.
Right.
Hmm.
Good. Another one, a name that I've known from going way back is Croft Mining.
Hmm.
It's a company that fell upon some hard times. They have a low grade surface mining project. They
Hmm.
have some 14 million ounces of gold I'm looking at well over 450 million ounces of silver. Low
Right.
grade, but with gold and silver prices where they are, obviously people are starting to pay attention to it. It does have a market cap
Hmm.
of 635 million, so it's a larger sort of junior than I'm accustomed to looking at. I
Hmm.
actually, you brought this to my attention, and I took a look at it and I said, wow, yeah, this is Hycroft that I knew from years ago, and we lost a lot of money on it, but it looks like it's something from a fundamental point of view that might be okay, especially with higher prices. But what are you seeing on the
Hmm.
technicals?
Right. And so that is the thing with Hycroft is that it's an optionality play.
Hmm.
It's a huge amount of silver in the ground and a good amount of gold. Even if it's low grade with the price of the metals where they are, and if they do continue to rise as we expect, then even the low grade plays can become, very profitable. And so that's from the fundamental perspective, that's kind of what I'm thinking there. With the technicals, now I know one of the problems with Hycroft in the past has been dilution. You can look at the share price over the years and it's been crushed.
Hmm.
So there is, I suppose, that risk still, but it's just now signaled a breakout on quarterly momentum and
Hmm.
had a decent surge. But it's still, you compare it to some other juniors out there or mid tiers, it looks like it's barely moved. So I think there's still something there
Hmm.
that, if silver prices, gold prices continue to rise, then this is the type of thing that could be like a call option. And so
Yeah.
while, I'm not putting all my money into something like that, it's an interesting case.
Yeah, well, you know what it is when after you cross over that strike price,
Hmm.
all of a sudden something that seems pretty worthless becomes very valuable very quickly. Can be the case,
Right.
and I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to take a look at this thanks to you actually for
Hmm.
bringing it to my attention. I'm going to look at it from a fundamental point of view.
Hmm.
HYMC,
Right.
I think, is a symbol, and 81 million shares selling at around $8, 784 was the last I saw it this
Hmm.
morning, I think. And one more miner that you mentioned was Aya Gold and Silver,
Right.
trades in Toronto, AYA in the United States, over the counter, AYASF,
Hmm.
silver producer in Morocco. Talk to us about that from a
That's
technical
right.
point of view.
Well, so with from the technical perspective, again, I'm looking at quarterly momentum. So that's a three-quarter moving average, and it's sort of equivalent to looking at like a 200-day average in terms of the time frame. But we're looking at monthly bars on that. Now it's already had a big move. You can pull up the price chart and see there is an explosive move already, and it's sort of been consolidating that
Mhm.
over the past couple years in a sort of uptrending channel on price. When you look at the quarterly momentum, it's got a base and it just needs a bit of a shove up to signal a breakout. So, in fact, if you take out the recent highs and let's say get to roughly 14.75 to $15, you've
Mhm.
got a huge multi-year breakout on quarterly momentum. So, I think you could get another big surge to the upside if you can actually secure that breakout. I could see $25 pretty quickly on it if that
Wow.
were the case.
Yeah, I'm
So,
looking at
mhm,
1474, I think, when I checked earlier today. So,
mhm.
so it's
And
not far from there. But if it breaks through that level, you think it has some more upside.
yes, and oh, to be clear, I'm speaking in US dollar terms here.
Right,
So,
right. Oh,
right.
maybe, yeah, maybe I was looking at
Mhm.
it from Canadian. Maybe that's a Canadian mark. Not
right?
sure.
It's $10.94 right now.
Oh, okay,
And
okay. Then I
yeah,
must have picked up the Canadian price because
that sounds like, yeah, the Canadian,
yeah,
yeah.
AYASF. Mm,
But with this one too, just a quick comment on a
yeah.
fundamental about it. It's the jurisdiction is what it is. So, that's always a concern with mining stocks, but where it is, they're basically in the middle of the desert in a mountain range. There's nobody there. There's no civilization around, no people, no animal life for the most part. So, in terms of environmental impact studies, in terms of permitting, that's very easy to achieve there.
Mm-hmm.
They pretty much have no problem getting permits, and environmental impact studies is like a page. You give them one page, it's like, okay, good to go.
It's
You
not
know,
the United States, I guess.
no, no, it's
All the
not.
lawyers that they don't waste their money on lawyers in some countries, I
No.
guess. Anyway,
Indeed. And so, but you could say, well, there's negatives to it or positives, but in
yeah.
terms of the business, they have huge deposits and getting the permits is not a problem. So actually running the business of mining in this aspect is, it's pretty easy for them. So I like it for that reason too.
We'll have to check with my friend Chen Lin because I know there was a silver company over there that he
Hmm.
was a Canadian company, essentially Canadian
Hmm.
based at that time. Well, it's still Canadian, I guess. So I have to check with him because it could very well be one that he followed in the past. So in any
Hmm.
event, Aya Gold and Silver, another one I'll have to take a look at. I just
Hmm.
checked; it's $10.99 currently as we speak.
Hmm.
All right. Well, before we go to some commodities, I'd like to ask you about some other or metals and
Hmm.
commodities. HydroGraph, which is of course a big deal for me
Indeed.
and for various other people. Last time we talked, it had just launched off the launch pad. It just taken off,
Hmm.
and it's gone up, and then it took a pretty good correction at one point. I think a lot of
Indeed.
short sellers went in there and jumped on that thing and thought they had a quick buck, and then it bounced back and now recently reached new highs. But what are you seeing technically?
Hmm. Yeah, so technically, two comments on it. One, it's hard to do any sort of forecasting with a new company like this
Yeah,
that doesn't have a
sure.
lot of history.
Yeah,
That's the sort of thing that you're going to have to rely more on your fundamental outlook for that
sure.
company. What is this technology worth? Can they execute on it? That sort of thing.
Mhm, yeah, sure.
So can't really make any comments on a long-term price target or anything
Right.
like that.
Understood. Sure.
But if you're long HydroGraph, let's say you've been in it for a while, obviously you're sitting on huge gains right now,
Hmm.
and you want to have some sort of risk control level somewhere where you say, okay, maybe I'll protect, some of my gains here, take some profits. Then I would watch the 10-week moving average.
Yeah, the 10 week is what you
Mhm.
mentioned before, I think.
Yeah. And that has held the whole way up since this sort of impulsive move began in July.
Hmm.
So that's been set and structured now by HydroGraph. So I would keep an eye on that. The 10-week moving average, it's $1.76 right now, and
Uh-huh.
it rises about 10 cents per week.
Uh-huh.
That's sort of like a 50-day moving average in terms of the time frame.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would keep your eye on as far as like, okay, where do I want to actually protect
Hmm.
since it's had such a huge move in such a short time. And no doubt there might be some people thinking, maybe I don't want to give back everything in case there's some huge drop here.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, keep your eye on that 10-week moving average.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, like I said, hard to have any sort of long-term forecast at this point from a technical perspective.
So if it would break through or look like it's about to break through, you might take some money off the table and
Hmm.
yeah, de-risk it to a certain extent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably pretty good advice. I think there have been some people have been taking profits along the way. We see some days like today too, it's down again. So anyway, we'll watch that 10 week moving average. All right.
Hmm.
Well, just on a couple of the commodities, then copper.
Hmm.
How's that looking to you now, technically?
Yeah. So copper is interesting. It's we've been looking at copper miners with the COPX ETF, and it has very clear, well, it just broke out on quarterly momentum in the past few months.
Mhm.
And we've got a target on that as far as the copper miners. I could easily see them, that ETF, COPEX, I could easily see it double from here.
Hmm.
And for some copper juniors, perhaps that could be, an even bigger move, of
Sure.
course. I haven't really looked at any specific copper juniors.
Yeah.
I've just kind of been keeping it more general with that ETF. And as far as the copper price, it looks set to have a huge breakout here of multi-year, basing setup. So think of it in these terms. If you go back to the 80s and the 90s and you look at the price of copper then, roughly $1.50, $1.60 was about as high as it would go.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then in the early 2000s, it shot through that up to, let's say, between $4.50 to $5. Then that became the new price ceiling.
Hmm.
And the 2008 collapse, it sort of back tested at $1.50, the previous, what used to be ceiling or resistance, bounced off that. So now it's living in a higher price range than what it was back then in the 80s and 90s. Now it looks set to break out of this price range. So with $5 roughly, 450 to 5 being the current ceiling, I would expect that to become the new support in the future.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
maybe you back test that at some point with a deflationary pulse, but I would expect to see a new price range where if you were to replicate what it did before, you could see $10 copper or even $13 copper or something like that.
Hmm.
So that could be within the
Wow.
next year or two. But that's what I'm expecting there. And I think the way that I'm looking to play it is not through copper futures, but the copper miners.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Okay. So what was that ETF again? It was what?
COPX.
COPX. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Platinum, you mentioned platinum looks interesting to you.
Yeah, indeed. Platinum. You could also look at palladium. That's one we've been looking at for, well, since late last year for our subscribers. Again, looking at the miners, and there's of course certain bellwether miners there, like Impala or Sibanye-Stillwater. So we've just been looking at those two. There's a few juniors out there I've seen people talk about as well, but we've kind of focused on the bigger ones. And it's a similar story with platinum or palladium as it is with copper, where again, you've had these ranges over time. In the case of platinum, it would have been between $340 to $640 was your sort of price range in the 80s and 90s. You
Right.
exploded through that up to roughly what, $2,200 at the peak, and then sort of set back into a new range between about 750 to 1800. And so again, I would expect to see something similar here, like with copper, where with this current move, I think we're going to get a breakout above the prior high. Where it goes beyond that, I don't know, but a similar move could take it up to $5,000 platinum.
My
And again,
goodness.
that could
Yeah.
take a few years to do that, but I would not be shocked to see that kind of move occur across base metals and precious metals like this. And it just makes sense to me if the monetary metals are doing what they're doing, and these base metals have setups to do something similar to what they did, 15, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Uh, that's what we're forecasting here.
Yeah, the base metals, the monetary metals, of
Mhm.
course, probably gold is leading the way, as your father calls it, the big mama.
Right.
And then you've got silver. Usually in the late stages of a bull market, silver outperforms gold, and I guess it's starting to do that. Your dad does a lot of work with the relative
Right.
prices, the spreads and so forth that he looks at. Very valuable, I think. And also, I
Indeed.
know that in his weekend report, he showed gold in the S&P 500 and says the most important technical situation to watch regarding the major asset categories is gold relative to the S&P 500, he's saying. So,
Yes.
and once that breaks through, and it looks like it's starting to,
Hmm.
then he thinks I guess that means, what does that mean? We're really onto a bull market relative to stocks. So you see asset classes changing. I guess that's the idea, right? Exiting one
Indeed.
exit. So most of the people still over on one side of the boat that's loving the Magnificent Seven and all the rest of those hot things, and nobody's paying too much. They're starting to pay attention to mining shares, but actually, when you look at the market
Mhm.
cap of the mining industry, it's still minuscule compared
It's
to
tiny.
to even one of those members of the Magnificent Seven. So it's crazy.
Compared to Nvidia, even it's, we're talking trillions of dollars
Yeah,
versus,
it's yeah,
yeah,
bigger than most countries. So
indeed.
all right, so maybe just a quick what about the Mag 7? Is there anything there that
Mm.
looks promising and looks good, or are you getting kind of scared with sort of frightened with all of them?
I wouldn't say that I'm frightened per se,
Yeah,
but I do think that the comments you made about the spread situation or the ratio between gold and the S&P,
yeah.
that's what's key to us,
Mm-hmm.
and that has broken out now, favoring gold over the
Mm-hmm.
S&P 500.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we would rather be. Like, let's say a scenario where everything goes up,
Yeah.
we would rather be in the precious metals because that's what that spread chart is telling us. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Now this is what's going to outperform. It's already outperforming. And you look at the performance year to date. I mean, gold's up over 50%, silver 66%, GDX is up over 100%, and then S&P is up 16, Nasdaq 23. I mean, they're up. It's not bad, but
Yeah.
we can see what's winning this year and even last year.
Yeah.
Nvidia's up 50%, so it's like, okay, well, gold's doing the same or a little bit better. And I think recently what is concerning most of all is this gapping up action we've had in just the past few days based solely upon Trump tweets having to do with, tariff wars. It's like, I would not, if I were heavily long Nvidia, let's say, or any tech stock or just heavily into the indices, just NASDAQ 100, I would not want to see that as like, this is the motivator behind this kind of price action is just
Yeah.
because of some Trump tweets and it's like, oh, the tariff deal and oh, no
No.
deal. Now what's even going on there? So it's already been selling off here though, in just the past few days. So I think the market is maybe digesting that was some BS.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, if everything is going up, as you're saying,
Mm,
but some things are going up a lot faster than the precious metals are outperforming. What that really means is the dollar is going down, and so the
mm,
denominator or the measuring stick is getting longer or shorter, however you want to view it. It's losing value.
yes.
So I guess that begs the question then, what about U.S. Treasuries, which are denominated in dollars? Now, I know there's
Mm,
some talk about possibly linking the long bond to gold. There's
mm,
some talk
mhm.
about that within the administration. Maybe something like that will change things, but for now, U.S. Treasuries are denominated in an asset that's becoming worthless relatively
Mm,
quickly, you might say. So
indeed.
what are you seeing on the charts for U.S. Treasuries?
So for treasuries, I mean, we've been long-term bearish, meaning
Yeah.
price down, yield up
Hmm.
since late 2020, October of 2020. Nothing's really changed in that outlook. Now, in the past few years, they've sort of quit going down. Yields have just sort of stayed high.
Right.
Uh, it could be that they're consolidating for another move higher, yields higher.
Yeah.
And it looks like that may even be what's happening now that the Fed just is not in control of the long end of the curve.
Hmm.
They can cut rates all they want on the short end. The long end doesn't seem to care. And the signal to us that that's happening, that there's another shock in terms of yields rising, would be we need to see T-bond futures, that's what we're looking at here,
Hmm.
drop to close a month at 111 or lower.
Hmm.
And that'll break down on quarterly momentum. So it'll signal another downside leg in terms of bond prices.
Hmm.
So, and that in just in terms of, where would you park your money? If I had to use one word, I would say bonds are just uninvestable.
Yeah.
I would not be putting my money there. Uh, they've drastically underperformed gold and silver. They've underperformed the stock market. Uh, Even with the yield, it just doesn't compensate. So no, I would consider that it's not. I don't think it's a safe haven anymore, and I think that
Right.
that's what the market is saying. Like, no,
Yeah.
this we do not see this government paper as a safe haven. That's gold. So yeah, that's where
Uh,
we stand on it.
well, I think you're right. And I think,
Mhm.
if you go to the notion of a fourth turning, I like
Mm.
to say this is America's fourth turning. The first one was the Revolutionary War, then you had the Civil War, then you had the Great
Mm,
Depression and World War II, and now this one. And this is, at least in my lifetime up until now, whenever you had a meltdown in the stock market and you had a recession or depression,
hmm.
the bonds did very well. Of course, during the
Right.
1930s, they were backed by gold. But even since then, with the dollar being the world's reserve currency, it's everybody went to the dollar when there was trouble. When there was trouble, that's not happening, and that
Well,
hasn't been happening for a few years now. So
it's interesting you bring up the gold-backed bond because I just read the article from was it Judy Shelton about that.
yes, that's right. Hmm.
On that, I would just say I wouldn't trust the government
Yeah,
with that. And back then in the 30s, they did the same thing. And then in 33, they just made it illegal for Americans to own gold.
oh,
So
exactly. Yeah,
they just completely abrogated that agreement. It's why I just wouldn't trust them at all if
yeah,
they did that and said, "Hey, it's backed by gold." I'm like, so I could actually, return this to you and you'll give me gold, right? Well,
right.
let's see if they actually would keep their word on that, if they even do it,
Yeah,
which I doubt
well,
they would.
that's a
But
very good
yeah,
point. Even though I believe that
mm,
probably it was unconstitutional for Roosevelt to do what he did, that's what I believe, but I'm not on the Supreme
yeah,
Court and I'm not part of the government. So,
right.
property rights can be gone if the powers that be think it's in our best interest or probably in their best interest, but
Mm-hmm.
be that as it may. We have to live with what we have and do the best we can. And maybe just ask you before we conclude, Bitcoin is having a rough day today.
Hmm.
Yeah, your father is turning pretty negative on Bitcoin. I gather from my discussions with him not long ago.
Hmm.
You probably look at the charts too for Bitcoin. How's it look to
Indeed. Yeah, well, there's two things on Bitcoin that concern us technically. One is that the spread versus gold is breaking down, so meaning
you?
it favoring gold over Bitcoin. And if you take a wider view, zoom out a few years, you had the peak in Bitcoin in 2021,
Hmm.
and that was just, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was just something like 70,000.
Hmm.
And then you have the peak here, which is 124,000
Right.
priced in gold. So, you do that ratio chart again, it's the same peak. So Bitcoin's
Ah,
not made any headway
yeah.
versus gold in the past 4 years.
Uh-huh.
So they're in that regard, they're matched in terms
Hmm.
of performance, but now that spread is starting to break down favoring gold. So that's the
Hmm.
first warning sign to us. And then the other one, we have a couple of long-term momentum charts we watch on Bitcoin, 100-week average. It's like a 2-year moving average, and then a 3-quarter average as well.
Hmm.
Those are the two that we're really watching now. So the 100-week, it had a breakdown just a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
but the 3-quarter average is really the key one I think we need to watch. And for that, I would say you don't want to see Bitcoin drop to 100,000 or lower.
Wow.
That'll be sufficiently broken at that point. So, and it's a very toppy looking pattern on the chart, so that it's concerning. So if that's what I would
Yeah.
watch, the spread versus gold, and then you don't want to see 100K on Bitcoin here. So the 1 day of weakness here or there, of course, doesn't make a trend,
Sure.
but the fact that it's not really been following with gold here
Yeah.
is concerning. Yes.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, it makes sense, Brett, because we're really looking at Bitcoin is denominated in what? In fiat,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. So unless you attach it somehow to gold, I guess stable coins is one thing. Stable coins, I understand you can, or some of them are backed by gold. So
I've heard about that. I don't really have any comments on it. I haven't
yeah,
read enough, but I
yeah.
have heard that there is such a thing as
Well,
like a gold backed. Yeah.
I know that the U.S. Treasury is hoping to use stable coins to help fund the Treasury market.
Mm,
Uh, in third world countries where their currencies are much worse than the dollar, I guess,
mm,
and people aren't bankable or whatever. There are people that are buying stable coins for that reason, and it's a a significant amount of treasury buying. I understand from that, but
hmm.
nonetheless, if the confidence is lost in the dollar, where do you go? As J.P. Morgan said, gold is
Right.
money, everything else is credit, and there's not a lot of places to go except I guess people should go to olivermsa.com though. Now you're working with your father, right? So
Indeed.
you don't have a separate business. You're working with
No, no.
your
That's
dad
right.
Your dad wouldn't permit that. Son,
No, it's not about
son, you're gonna
outside
work.
business activity. No, can't do that.
Son, I own you. No, your dad. Listen, your dad is a great guy. I mean, he's just been wonderful to me. Been one of my largest, one of my most popular guests, and I'm so glad to see
It's good to hear.
him succeeding, doing very, very
Hmm.
well with bigger platforms now. So it's very gratifying to me. Brett, I want to
Indeed.
thank you so much. Anything else to add before maybe we'll talk again sometime soon, but anything else for now?
I think that's it for today, Jay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that is it for today. Actually, there will be another interview this week. I'm going to be talking to a company called Pacific Ridge, which I just learned about, and I'm starting to cover that stock in my newsletter. And so regular subscribers to my regular paid subscribers will be privy to an audio version of that interview. And then we'll go on YouTube next week, about Wednesday of next week. So that's it for now. Until we meet again, goodbye and God's blessings to you.